Hello world, it's been a few weeks since I've seen you, and today I wanted to kind of describe what's happened, why I haven't uploaded a video for a little while at any rate, and that's because my poor Mac has been in Mac hospital. I went out to do some photography in London a few weeks ago, just went for a walk, just taking photographs, got back home, loaded up my memory card into the back of my iMac, edited my photos, got them online, and then suddenly the screen turned to black with a question mark on it. Well, a folder and with a question mark on it, and a support.apple.com message underneath, and that was it. My hard drive had obviously frazzled. Not only had my hard drive frazzled, but it had also frazzled an external hard drive, which I'm annoyed about and which I'll have to try and do something about in the future. But after selling a kidney, I have managed to get this iMac mended. This is really what has inspired this video, this visit to an Apple store to get it mended, because obviously I phoned technical support and they said, oh, there's nothing we can do, kind of thing. They went through trying to get it into internet recovery mode and everything else like that. Was having none of it. It actually involved a trip over to me. My nearest store is Brighton, right? Well, you can't drive to Brighton because you can't park there without paying another arm and a leg. Anyone who lives where I live will know and will agree with me. You know, it is just untenable to actually be able to park in Brighton even for a couple of hours without having to pay 25-30 quid for the privilege. So no, we weren't doing that. It was cheaper for a friend and I to go by train. So we got a lurid pink suitcase, stuffed it with pillows and stuff because I didn't have the original box for it, because this is 5 years old. Well, we managed to get this thing over to Apple via the train, and you know, thankfully it's not too much of a walk from Brighton station to get to the Apple store in Brighton. But it's basically, what we're talking about is a hard drive change. That's all we're talking about. And yeah, it's my iMac. I did specify it up to the gills when I bought it 5 years ago. But one of the things that I didn't do was specify an SSD. Perhaps an SSD might have lasted a bit longer. But then again, I've never used a computer longer than 5 years, apart from this one, which, you know, at 5 years, the hard drive inside it decided to fail. So it's a 3 terabyte Fusion drive, right? Now, a 3 terabyte Fusion drive is not the end of the world. It really isn't the end of the world. And I just got to thinking that, like, back in the day, when people were buying computers in the 90s and noughties, manufacturers were falling over themselves to try and tell you how easy these things were to get inside, to upgrade, to connect to things. We'll come back to that one in a minute. But now we seem to have completely lost our right to repair. Now that they're soldering RAM onto boards, now there might be performance benefits to that. Yeah, the M1 chip has basically got a system on a chip, all right, but it's at the expense of the loss to repair. The M1 is totally, or the M1 Studio is totally unrepairable. Even my Intel i7 iMac, apart from being able to put a little bit of RAM into the back, is totally unupgradable. It's unrepairable by the user. And this is, I just think it's a huge statutory right that we're losing, because back in, as I say, back in the day, no one was invalidating a guarantee by opening a computer up. You know, if you look at a wonderful Apple YouTuber like Luke Mayani, for example, he will buy like a box of 32 cacked out 2013 MacBooks and stuff like that, and get all the parts together and make working MacBooks out of these things. It wasn't so long ago, and this is what happens. Customers are losing their statutory rights to be able to repair things, to be able to upgrade things. I should never have had to go through the difficulty just to replace a hard drive that I did, and the extra cost as well. Okay, and this is like coming on to the M1 as well now. There are two varieties of M1, M1 Max and the M1 Ultra. They are extremely expensive. They look like they're replacing the 27-inch iMac because they're basically a box like the Mac Mini. I'm not going to go too much into the sort of fanboy details. Watch a fanboy website for that. This is a rant, I'm afraid. It's a wee bit of a moan, okay? There is a big proviso about that, which we'll come to at the end, but it's basically a box that Apple do not want you to get inside at all, all right? The reason I say that looks like it's replacing the 27-inch iMac is because they are also selling a complimentary display for it as well that is, funnily enough, 27 inches. So basically, if you've got another monitor, fair enough, use your other monitor. If you don't like the Apple keyboard and mouse, fair enough, use something else that is more suited to you. At the end of the day, it's a box that you cannot get into and upgrade. Some people on the internet have pointed out that there is a second slot that looks like it's for a second SSD drive, but then when they've investigated it further by sort of prying away at the adhesive, there's like a black circle at the bottom, which is like a rubber kind of circle, and if you sort of pry away at that, then you get to the screws that are holding the thing together, and then you can get inside it, and then you'll see that there looks like a spare SSD slot for a hard drive. But actually, be logical. If you're going to replace the hard drive, you should also be able to replace the RAM. Where's the RAM in this thing? On a chip. You can't do anything about it. Anyone who can get the funds together, and I appreciate that we're a world at war, and also that the cost of living crisis is making things ever so difficult, even for people just to get enough food to eat and enough heating. So, I don't at all kind of diminish the fact that most people, including myself, are not in a position to get one. However, if you do need to, then it looks like this is the upgrade for a 27-inch iMac. At least if you specify the M1 Max, which is the cheaper of the two options. The M1 Ultra seems to be, although it's essentially the same computer, it essentially is double the power, and I think that is probably going to replace the iMac Pro. And, fair enough to it. It's $4,000. And then if you do want the Apple monitor, you can obviously get cheaper ones, but if you do want the Apple monitor, that is a minimum of $1,300, or if you want the coated glass, it's something like £1,800 or something like that. So that is essentially doubling the price of the 27-inch iMac that is outgoing. And really, who's benefiting? Who's benefiting? Let's guess. There will be huge performance benefits. Obviously, I would give my high teeth to have either of these. It scared me having a hard drive failure. I wonder what on earth is going to fail next. That's how I feel. Because you could say, right, well, the 24-inch iMac's good. 24-inch iMac also for me saves an awful lot of space. However, it's got two connectors on it, or at least the base model. Two, I think they're USB-C. I have no clue. I try to understand this, but I just don't. With Thunderbolt, USB-C, USB 3, what the heck is the difference? And how can you tell one from the other? Because they all look the same. They're all just a tiny little hole. And every year, something needs to be upgraded. One of these connectors, in particular Thunderbolt. I think I first got Thunderbolt in 2014, 2015, something like that. I think my first 27-inch iMac had Thunderbolt on it. It was called Thunderbolt 1. And I bought 2 Thunderbolt hard disk drives. As I say, one of them's failed. 2 3 terabyte hard disk drives. One for Time Machine and one for just chucking on sort of stuff that I didn't want clogging up my computer's hard drive. And every year that Thunderbolt thing has changed. Thunderbolt 2, Thunderbolt 3, we're on Thunderbolt 4 now. And somewhere along the line, they're interchangeable. Are they interchangeable with USB-C? I don't know. I think perhaps that's probably the case. But I just cannot get my head around it. I really cannot get my head around it. And I've got a whole basket full of redundant leads and converters for this and converters for that. And none of them ever seem to be the correct lead that I need. And so with that in mind, the 24-inch iMac, either with 2 USB-Cs or 4, it's not going to cut it for me. It's absolutely not, because these things don't even have gigabit Ethernet sockets. They certainly don't have an SD card socket. I'm a photographer. I take photographs. I need an SD card socket. Yes, you can do it by Wi-Fi, but at the moment, the technology is slow as molasses and it's unreliable, and therefore an SD card socket just takes the aggro out of it. I know it's a bit of unplugging and plugging in somewhere else, but it takes a second, it works, it's reliable, it always has worked. And so I don't see how, if they can put an SD card socket onto a $2,000 M1 Max or a $4,000 M1 Ultra, why can't they do it with a $1,000 24-inch iMac, or with one of with their laptops? Again, at one stage, manufacturers were falling over themselves trying to sell you connections. My first Mac ever was a black MacBook, 2007 edition, had FireWire 400. It had SD card slots, gigabit Ethernet. It had USB sockets all over the place, and yet they managed to do it. Okay, fair enough. USB 3 and C and stuff weren't available then, but for their time, they were equipped. They were equipped with anything that people were likely to need. And I cannot see that there is any excuse not to put an SD card slot on a computer, even the iMac 24, which is still expensive. And, and just the other connectivity issue I have is with dear old USB-A. We have all got USB thumb drives. I know that they're old-fashioned. I know that they belong to 2002 and, very nice indeed. Yes, perhaps they belonged to a netbook. I know. However, they're still extremely useful. Behind me is a piano. All right? I record music. All right? Digital pianos technology and stuff is still in the arc. And therefore, for my digital piano to have a USB-A socket so that I can record myself playing and have a MIDI file with me playing on it is actually, that was space age, even back in 2000 and whenever, like 1999, I think I first got a digital piano, and it hasn't really improved since then. My MIDI keyboard that I use to do other recording within Logic is similarly equipped with one lead that has a USB-A socket on it. My Riga CD player with its DAC has a USB connector, basically. And apparently, yes, you can get adapters that will convert them to USB-C or USB 3 or whatever. I don't know which ones you would actually need to do with that. But again, it's like having a club boot. I've already got lead hell around in my lounge with speaker leads and God knows what else, charger leads and everything else like this, that and the next thing. I really don't want yet another club boot hanging out of the back of my Mac with to adapt things from USB-A to whatever. Again, if you can do it on the M1 Max and the M1 Ultra, and you can even do it on the Mac Mini, which is a third the size of the M1 Studios, you can put USB sockets on. You can put SD card slots on. Why are we being charged through the nail for technology that is as cheap as chips and that would just make life so much more easier and so much more compatible? Now, I know that I'm 53 years old, all right? And for me, therefore, I get a bit grumpy in my old age and think, well, you know, why on earth can't they just keep things the same just for 5 minutes? You will feel like that yourself one day. I promise you. If you're 25 and you're watching me and thinking, oh, what's he getting all in a fluff about USB and SD cards for? No one ever uses those. They do use them. I use them. As I say, I've just detailed 3 real world experiences where I use that USB socket every day for something or other. Even if it's just taking the sound output out of my computer into my hi-fi to be able to watch a movie and get good sound. You know, this is, you know, they make life really difficult, and it makes an upgrade path should I ever need to, you know, and again, you know, I would have to sell my kidneys and probably a few other vital organs as well in order to be able to do it. But yeah, should I ever have to, I can't really see anything other than, at the moment, the M1 Studios as being any kind of upgrade at all. I would resent having to do it, because having to buy a separate monitor, having to then, you know, also buy the box, it puts the price through the roof. And as I say, if you buy the Apple monitor with it as well, it more or less doubles the price of the 27-inch iMac as was. And for something that was nearly that price, when I retired from work, I used a little bit of my money to be able to specify this to be able to start World War III. Not that I would want to, but I could have done if I wanted, if, you know, I was that way inclined. You know, it as I say, it was quad core, 4.2 gigahertz i7 chip. It was 3 terabyte Fusion drive, 32 gigabytes of RAM, you know, and 5 years later you see it going out of date. You start worrying when things fail and you think, well, how long has this thing got in it? Whatever. And yeah, so, you know, I just feel frustrated. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is shareholders. Apple don't want you to upgrade your computer because they want the money themselves to do it for you. If they were to suddenly return to putting in handy little doors that opened the little RAM case for you to be able to update your RAM, screws so that you could unscrew the thing and put an SSD in there should you need to do that, That's all taking away money from Apple, because you might not go to Apple. You might do what I used to do when I needed RAM upgrades, and that was there was a website, someone tell me what it is. It was a good third of the price of Apple RAM. You ran a test, it told you how much space you had on your machine for RAM, and took you to a web page that showed you what you could buy, what options you could buy, and you chose from there, and it didn't go anywhere near Apple. And you got the thing back, you put a little grounding sleeve thingy on, grounding strap on, and you opened your computer up, slid the RAM in, closed the door. It took 5 minutes. And that means that that RAM is something that shareholders from Apple are not getting the money for. And at the end of the day, corporations exist purely to make money for their shareholders. If they don't do that, then they are considered failing, and they have that one legal obligation above everything else. It's not about customer satisfaction. It's not about safety. Of course, if you're going to be in that position, then you've got to have customer satisfaction. You've got to have safety. You've got to have this, that, and the next thing as well. But at the end of the day, if you're not making the money for the shareholders, then as a company, you are failing. That's why Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, well, as was poor Steve, God bless him, started off all their presentations with how well we're doing in such and such a quarter. Because that is all that matters at the end of the day. It's wrong. It is wrong. And I know that I will probably get about 5 people watching this video, but if those 5 people then told another 5 people, then perhaps we might be able to do something about it. Because it isn't just Apple. It's every corporation. It's every corporation, ranging from the food you eat, to the utensils you cook with, to the water you drink even. Everything has to be owned by somebody. And it's not fair. It's not fair. Obviously with, this thing about, Apple that I'm talking about, as I say, we're a world that's on the cusp of World War III, and we're certainly on the cusp of a huge cost of living crisis. It's not a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of living disaster. And, Apple at the end of the day don't matter. But, for people like me and stuff who have had a lot of pleasure out of Apple, I don't doubt that the M1 Max and the M1 Ultra are fantastic computers. I'd imagine that as soon as I plugged one in, I would be blown away, should I be able to. But unfortunately, I'm not happy. I haven't really been happy with the way that Apple as a company are going in terms of taking away the autonomy that they gave us, or at least they told us we had. You know what I mean? At one stage, they were falling over backwards to tell us how convenient it was to upgrade a hard disk or add new RAM. Falling over backwards to tell us how well connected they were. And now it seems that they've just gone in totally the opposite direction. And at the end of the day, the people who benefit are them and their shareholders. And that's all that seems to matter. It's capitalism going mental. All right? Anyway, I will see you later. Thank you for watching. Bye.